Cono Vision.
Welcome to the Cono Vision Podcast, Episode 8. I am Jim Conrad, a.k.a. Cono, and in the spirit of storytelling, we will hear the story of Connection Lab, connectionlaboratory.com, with founder Russ Hamilton, and how the story of human-to-human engagement is so crucially important to the survival of the human species. That's later. But first, a story about why stories, our stories, matter.
Cono Vision.
Listening to stories and telling them helped our ancestors to live humanly, to be human. But somewhere along the way, our ability to tell and to listen to stories was lost. And as life speeded up, as the possibility of both communication and annihilation became ever more instantaneous, people came to have less tolerance for that which comes only over time. The demand for perfection and the craving for ever more control over a world that, paradoxically, seemed ever more out of control, essentially bred impatience with story. As time went by, the art of storytelling fell by the wayside, and those who went before us gradually lost part of what had been the human heritage, the ability to ask the most basic questions. Mythologist Joseph Campbell observed, "One of our problems today is that we are not well acquainted with the literature of the spirit. We're more interested in the news of the day and the problems of the hour." Thus distracted, we no longer listen to those who speak of the eternal values that have to do with the centering of our lives. The news of the day and the problems of the hour. We have inherited a world that has lost all real sense of time. Our most common complaint is that we have no time. We moderns are problem solvers, but the demand for answers crowds out patience, and perhaps especially patience with mystery. And that which we cannot control, we deny our own ambivalences, searching for answers to our most anguished questions in technique, hoping to find an ultimate healing in technology. But feelings of dislocation, isolation, and of off-centeredness persist, as they always do, as they always have. What do we do with this confusion, this pain? How do we understand that inevitable part of life captured in the term angst? The anxiety and anguish that seem an essential part of being alive today. Tradition suggests, listen to stories. For spirituality itself is conveyed by stories, which use words in ways that go beyond words, to speak what's called the language of the heart. A spirituality of not having all the answers, stories convey the mystery and the miracle, the adventure of being alive.
Cono Vision.
I am Jim Conrad, joined by Russ Hamilton. Hello, Russ.
Hello, Jim.
You have a company called Connection Lab.
I do.
Give me a thumbnail sketch of what Connection Lab does.
Connection Lab provides workshops and executive coaching for organizations, individuals that want to get better at communication, presentation, and leadership development. It is a methodology that can save your business, it can save your community, and it can save the world.
How important in business is communication?
What's the scale?
I'd have to answer that question by asking you the same question.
Yeah. So if we say 1 to 10, how important is communication in helping a business fulfill its potential?
Thrive.
I would say 9.8. Before it's a business crisis, before it's a healthcare crisis, before it's a climate crisis, it's a communication crisis.
So companies that recognize this
Yeah.
try to then embody or teach these skills to their workers. But is that relationship changing between employer and employee in the new technological marketplace?
Constantly. First of all, it's a new technological marketplace every 15 minutes. So it's constantly changing. We joke in our workshops and say, well, at least that's the last change. Oh, thank goodness. Change. No more changes. That's the last. Oh, hang on. I'm getting a text. Oh, there's a new change. Oh, crap. It's constantly changing.
And that's stressful.
Totally. Very stressful. Again, on a scale. Some companies are very good at adapting. So they're very good at self-diagnosis. They're very, but those are very small companies. Big ones really struggle with adaptation and flexibility. They struggle with, adopting new technologies. They struggle with adopting new cultures, mergers and acquisitions. There's a new company that we're bringing in that's bringing a whole new culture. And while we want all the benefits of that organization, we're also bringing their cultural baggage. And sometimes that can infect a whole part of our organization or like most of it. So it's extremely dangerous for some companies to have poor self-awareness and have poor self-diagnosis skills and to kind of reject that we're in a river that's constantly changing every few minutes. Because there are companies that would prefer just to reject that that's true.
Yes.
And just focus on what we control and what we're good at. And those companies are short-lived and struggle.
What is the spark in a CEO's brain when he decides, or what is the information that he gets? Is it from a consultant? Is it from internal diagnostics to say, okay, we need to hire Russ Hamilton and bring him in with his Connection Lab methodology because we're obviously not communicating? And how does that manifest itself in, let's say, the day-to-day operations of any company?
A company that doesn't communicate well often has a very toxic culture, very protective, very siloed, very internally competitive. Dominant personalities tend to suppress introverts and quieter personalities. Dominant personalities identify if the company is safe or not. The loudest person in the room gets to determine if the company is safe to communicate in.
Right.
Of course it's safe. Why wouldn't you think it's safe? Who doesn't think it's safe? And of course, everybody who's an introvert and doesn't feel safe is going to sit on their hands and not going to communicate because they don't feel safe. So we want to be careful not to generalize CEOs because they are as varied as any other kinds of human beings. So this idea that a CEO is suddenly, its own unique thing, I want to be careful not to generalize.
Because some of those CEOs are brought in from other companies with other cultures.
Yep.
And now they either try to force their culture, what they've learned, upon this new organization that they're running. And they can do that because they're the CEO.
Yeah.
Or they have to try to adapt to whatever the culture that exists in that company. Now, usually if they're brought in, that company isn't, as a new CEO, that company isn't doing well. And so they have to try to turn things around, quote unquote.
That's one story. Another story is the company has grown out of the founder. That, in fact, it's been very, very successful, and the founder has helped it go from 4 employees to 1,000, which is overwhelming for this person who is great at a technology or a service and has no experience organizing a board, organizing funding, organizing a variety of finance, organizing shareholders, IPO. This person has no experience with that. And so the existing board says, look, you've done great and we're going to find a role for you, but you are not qualified to bring this organization to the next level.
Right.
Would you like to see it fulfill its potential? And that CEO, that man or that woman is inevitably, going to say yes because this is great, but it's also very hard to let go. Yeah, I've seen a lot of varied experiences in the C-suite.
Sometimes people don't know if they built, especially if they built a company, they don't want to let go because it's so intrinsically tied to who they are.
Their identity.
Yeah.
It can be an excruciating process to convince or otherwise remove a founder because they are now harming their company. And sometimes the founder is right when they put on the brakes and say, we don't want another CEO here. We don't want another C-suite because it is a culture-based organization and I am the magnet for that culture. And they can be right. Getting a new CEO is extremely dangerous. Have you seen, I forget the film, the name of it, but it's basically the story of Apple, Steve Jobs and the CEO. And, they bring in the Pepsi guy, the CEO of Pepsi to come and take over Apple, and he doesn't understand the product. He's trying to take all the money from the older computer and put it in all these new products, and they don't want to invest in the thing that's making them the most money. And Jobs gets removed, and of course, that's a pretty delicate story, but so are all these stories, are enormously sophisticated and packed with nuance. And to your earlier question, the problem is usually communication, which can take a while to unpack. What does that mean, communication? Because it is a galaxy of definitions and predispositions. I've been studying epistemology and linguistics as part of a requirement to really understand what's going on. And did you know that there were 6,000 languages in human history? There have been 6,000 languages recorded in human history. And of those 6,000 languages, 5,000 of them are impenetrable to the other. I've been caught in a winter storm in Magadan, Russia, northeastern Russia. And man, there's no Spanish there. There's no Latin-based languages. There's no Scandinavian, Germanic English, that you are looking at symbols. You have no idea what they mean.
Only the locals know.
And they look at you like, why are you standing in 8 feet of snow? And it's like, well, we're trying to find a restaurant. But you can't have that conversation because nothing I'm saying is penetrable to the people hearing it.
Now, that speaks to what's happening today, where the universal language is quickly becoming our mother tongue, English.
Yeah. It's still a dominant business language. It's still the language that pilots use. In pretty much every commercial airline in the world, they use English. It's the language most often in finance. But language is also used to separate people. Think of twins in the house, kids that are born together. They suddenly come up with their own language, right? They can whisper and hum and talk and use hand signals, and the rest of the family has no idea what they're talking about, and they are pretty good with that. They're pretty good with the fact that nobody can understand it. So language becomes a way to separate ourselves from people and isolate and in a way elevate. We're better than you. And now we're into a territory that is worth exploring to say, how is this an impediment to people around the world communicating?
How is language and tribalism? Is language part of tribalism?
I feel like that's what we're describing.
Yeah.
I think language is self-developed. It's interesting. There's a couple of schools of thought around how because we don't know. Communication is one of the great mysteries of science. We don't know who was the first person to actually use language. We don't, we've seen artwork on the walls in France and Africa, but we don't know how it began. There's the Noam Chomsky argument that says one day one person woke up and could do it. There's also the more anthropological background, which is
over time
it was developed.
Our guttural grunts and squawks and squeaks started to have different meanings if we link them together in some way, shape,
That's
or
right.
form.
And anthropologically, we would kind of, as chimpanzees, kind of walk on all fours. And then we started to walk upright, which left our hands free to communicate, which was a whole new thing when we started to stand upright.
Yeah.
And then when we weren't working as hard to do things, our facial expressions started to get involved. And so the grunts with facial and with hands started to offer a communication source. So there's that school of thought. Those are the two primary schools of thought, that it developed over time or one person woke up one day and started teaching everybody.
And we are, as human beings, we are symbol-identifying, meaning-seeking creatures, aren't we? Tie that back into, in one of your seminars on leadership development.
Yeah.
Is meaning and value a part of the equation?
Yeah. Well, what that question makes me think of is the distinction between autonomy and community.
Autonomy and community.
Because everybody has their own definitions of value. Everybody has their own definitions of who they are and what's happening. Often those definitions are informed by what they're fed and what narratives they're consuming and media they're consuming. But the difference between autonomy and community, if you think of a teeter-totter, and on each end of the teeter-totter, one end is autonomy, the other end is community. Where do I put myself at any given moment between autonomy? Am I like more on the autonomy side? What does autonomy mean? Autonomy means how I define my right to self-govern, self-determine. My autonomy, my experience, my senses, my sense of smell, touch, taste, sound, all these things. My personal experience in this world, my right to determine who I am, to self-govern, and to self-identify. That's autonomy. Community is you and I in a room together with some friends in the booth out there, and we're a little community doing a recording right now on what we assume is a common mission to create some interesting content for Cono Vision. Both things exist simultaneously. So in a way, this is our approach to duality. The particle and the wave, that light itself is both a particle and a wave. Communication is both autonomy and community. Both have to exist simultaneously for a successful communication to take place. And we live in a society that tends to want us to choose, pick a side. Do you want to be heavy autonomy and see the world as a threat to your autonomy or as a benefit to it? Or do you want to live in a community and see the world as a threat to the community or as a benefit to it? The call to action is to embrace autonomy and community as two opposite things that are existing in the same place at the same time, duality.
When you're doing your seminars and explaining that concept, another part of your practice and methodology is to make people aware how they react under stress.
Yeah.
Because we react differently. When we're relaxed and we have minimal stress, we can have certain ideals, certain ways and practices that we do things. But then when we are under stress, all manner of things begin to occur, including reflexive thinking that's been buried back in there for a long time. But as soon as we become stressed out, boom. So your methodology is to identify that, identify when you're in a stressful situation, but more importantly, look at yourself and see how you react under stress.
Yes. How do I show up under stress is the first primary question out of 3 primary questions in our 6-box model. We have a 6-box model, 3 primary questions, 3 primary relationships. The questions we use as lenses to look through at the 3 primary relationships, and they can be applied to everything. The first question in the 6-box model is, how do I show up under stress? And of course, as soon as I introduce that question in a workshop, people kind of glaze over and start thinking about how they show up under stress. And it's like, the answer is not great. Right. So I can see their faces starting to change and they're like, am I really supposed to? And I'm like, no, that's not the purpose of the question. The purpose of the question is a lens to look through at our 3 primary relationships, self, content, and audience. If you want to check this out, you can do this on the Connection Laboratory website. We have our 6-box loud and proud there. And that's the framework that we step through into all of our work.
So the lens looks at self, content,
audience.
And the audience.
Right. Those are our 3 primary relationships.
Right.
How do I show up under stress is our first lens. Right. And instead of going, let me tell you about how I show up under stress, that's not the purpose of the question in this context. Instead, people will say, well, what do you mean by stress, Russ? Because what's stressful for you might be different than what's stressful for me. And I'm like, fantastic. Let's have that conversation. And then the next follow-up question might be, which of my skills and abilities disappear first under stress that I have in abundance when I'm chill and relaxed, which was a point you were making earlier.
Yeah.
What a lovely thing to explore. The next follow-up question is, can I notice how I show up under stress without judgment or correction? Or do I automatically lay the boots into myself for being such a jerk under stress? What a bag of fertilizer. I showed up that way. I'm supposed to be a professional, but here I am.
My cool.
Right, and now I'm supposed to be the model for all the, no, arf. Right? Can I notice how I show up under stress without judgment or correction? And the target phrase, anytime I notice how I'm showing up under stress, the target phrase is, isn't that interesting? Because that one phrase means it's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad, it's just how I'm showing up under stress. Another follow-up question we ask is, does my audience know more about how I show up under stress than I do?
And the audience could be anybody.
Could be anybody in front of you. Could be one person. Could be the person across from you on the bus.
And that speaks to relationship.
That's right.
You have to be in relationship in order
Right.
to have an audience.
But if I have like a tick that I don't know about, and the person sitting across from me on the bus is like, oh, I hope they're okay. That person knows more about how I'm showing up under stress than I do, right?
Because of our innate inability to see ourselves.
I can't have your experience of me. I can't have your experience of me. I can only have, I'm busy in here trying to manage what's going on. And the same for you, man. So this question, how do I show up under stress, is a place that we can just spend the rest of our lives. And people do. In our case, we use that question and it pivots into the next question, the next primary question, which is, how do I want to show up under stress? If I could choose, I can't end stress in my life. And the fact is, I quite like some forms of stress. I show up really well under it. I like deadlines and things. I show up well in game time situations. I kind of love that excitement. Other people are like, oh, some kinds of stress are just absolutely debilitating. But how do I want to, if I could choose? I want to honor the stress that I'm under and still find a way, develop my relationship to stress to such a point where I can choose how I show up in this moment instead of my stress choosing for me. Because that's what usually happens. There's a moment where I just shrug and I step away from the wheel and my stress takes over. And the next thing you know, I'm throwing furniture across the room and I'm going to have to rebuild relationships or find a new job or a new spouse or who knows what, because I show up poorly under stress.
And that sometimes that reaction is a reflexive response from something deep inside you. So, what you're doing essentially is kind of business therapy?
Yeah. I mean, if that's language that's comfortable for you, I'm not sure I would use that language, but I'm not attached to it. I'm not attached to outcomes so much. What I'm interested in is introducing these questions and this methodology and then helping people use it. So if they start attaching their own language to it, fantastic. If it's business therapy, fantastic. Use that.
So how does stress then influence through with the lens onto content?
Yeah. So if we finish the 6 box, how do I show up under stress? Question 1. How do I want to show up under stress?
Right.
Question 2. Question 3 is, what do I want to get better at? Right? If I'm noticing how I'm showing up under stress, if there's a gap between how I'm showing up under stress and how I would choose to, what do I want to get better at? What competencies do I want to get better at? So I can start choosing how I show up under stress instead of my stress choosing for me. And people will say, well, Russ, can I put anything on that list that I'm trying to get better at? And the answer is yes. Can I put my golf swing on the list? Yes, if that's what you want to get. Like making Thai food? Yes, if that's what you want to get better at. But if you find yourself in a team lead situation, if you find yourself, leading a team of people or an organization or a community center or a family, you might want to start identifying competencies that will help you and your team fulfill your potential. Right. And I say it like it's easy. Identifying the outcome is easy, but identifying the competency that's going to lead to that outcome, that's a good question. What is the competency? And when I say competency, what's the thing I can practice?
Right.
Like piano or saxophone or whatever. So those are our 3 primary questions. How do I show up under stress? How do I want to show up under stress? What do I want to get better at? Our 3 primary relationships are self, content, and audience. My relationship to myself. How's my breathing? How's my hydration? How's my fitness? How's my sleep? How's my nutrition? People dedicate their lives to this relationship, and it's a perfectly noble way to spend your life. To your point, what is my content? That's our 2nd primary relationship. What am I good at?
Yeah.
How did I get good? What do I make every day? What artifacts do I create every day? And what if I don't make artifacts? What if I just have conversations? Does that count? What value am I bringing to these conversations? What experience or ambition? That's our 2nd primary relationship, is relationship to content. Over there in the right-hand corner is relationship to audience. And this is a big one. I mean, not that all of them aren't big, but does my audience feel seen by me? Right? Well, first of all, who's watching me at any given moment?
Yeah.
And can I see them? But does my audience feel seen? And almost more importantly, who decides if my audience feels seen? And this is a lovely moment in the workshop where people, make the thinking face and who decides if my audience feels seen by me? And people will guess, but usually it funnels down to, don't I decide if I feel seen, if you're the presenter and I'm the audience? Yes, if you're the audience, you decide if you feel seen. We all decide if we feel seen. This is part of autonomy.
And how do we know if we feel seen?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yes. What is and notice the operative word is feel.
Yeah.
So it's a sensation. of feeling seen. And usually it has to do with, people know when they feel seen.
Right.
They feel seen by their pets. They feel seen by toddlers. They feel seen by members of their family who kind of accidentally connect with each other. There's no methodology involved. We're just natural connected people. We're naturally connected to each other. But we are increasingly in a world where that connection is kind of marginalized and things that happen out of relationship are emphasized and amplified. But does my audience feel seen? Does my audience feel heard? Does my audience feel necessary for this presentation? Does my audience feel invited to inform my process and my content? What is my feedback process? What's it really in service of? All of these questions under the relationship of audience imply a set of competencies that I can practice or not in service of that relationship. So now we have 3 primary questions and 3 primary relationships. How do I show up under stress? How do I want to show up under stress? What do I want to get better at? Self, content, audience. Each of these relationships have their own set of competencies. It's kind of like playing 3 instruments at the same time, saxophone, piano, and drums, which is why people don't want to give the presentation. They don't want to stand up in front of the group.
Most people's worst fear is standing up in front of an audience and giving a speech.
Yeah.
Public speaking.
Yeah.
Now, why is that, do you think?
So I think there's a few reasons for it. One is because you're playing 3 instruments at the same time.
Yes.
And the likelihood of failure is high.
Yes.
With at least one of the relationships. And people hate failing. They are terrified. One of their greatest fears is looking stupid, looking foolish.
It's not the doing, it's how I will feel
When I fail.
When I fail.
Not if, when.
Yeah, when I fail.
And what's that going to look like?
Yeah.
We have nightmares about it. We have nightmares, the actor's nightmare of walking out on stage and not knowing your lines.
Yeah.
It's an enormous primal fear. What we do in our workshops is we hold it up and we say, isn't that interesting? And then we actually practice that, in fact, you can play all 3 instruments at the same time. You can. You can breathe. What you have to do is slow down and, in fact, prioritize relationship with the audience. Because once the audience feels seen and heard and necessary and invited, now you are no longer carrying the burden of a perfect presentation. You're collaborating in the room. You're carrying this exchange with everybody who feels seen and heard. It's a collaborative effort.
So the operative phrase then would be the audience becomes the content.
I would say the audience co-creates the content with you. You have your slide deck. You have your offer, but you've built it in such a way where you invite the audience to constantly inform it. And if the audience feels seen and heard, they will, even in silence, they'll lean forward. They will offer you their energy and their attention.
Because the mistake a lot of people do make in presentation is if they have enough technology and fancy gimmicks and slides, they can somehow perform an amazing presentation that will wow everybody, yet people glaze over.
Yeah.
Because they're being talked at, they're
That's
not
right.
being talked to.
It's a different instrument. If we go back to our 6-box, people try to improve their relationship with the audience by investing in their relationship with the content. It doesn't work. If I change the content on slide 61 of a 90-slide deck, that's really going to get them. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. It's not going to get them. It's a different instrument. Your piano playing is not going to get better when you practice the saxophone.
Right.
Your saxophone playing is going to get better,
yeah.
Which is a priority. It's a primary relationship. You need good content, but it's different than your relationship with your audience. Relationship with the audience is curiosity. What color their eyes? What color their eyebrows? What shapes do you see? We actually practice this in our workshops. And people start raising their hand when they feel seen because we get better as audience members and presenters, and we take turns being both. And the more we practice, the easier it gets. What was I so afraid of? Are you kidding me? And people who were convinced that they were introverts and terrible presenters and terrible creators and just awful as a contributor suddenly have to re-identify themselves and go, what if I'm actually good at this? Because I just got a bunch of feedback from an audience, most of whom I didn't know, or maybe I work with consistently, telling me that I'm the best presenter they've ever seen. And now their world starts to wobble and shift.
Yes.
Because their whole world, their whole identity is rocked. I am not a good communicator. I've grown up my whole life knowing I'm not a good communicator. I've always felt that I had things to say, but I never had the tools. I've never had the methodology that's going to help me close that gap and make it possible, make it collaborative. And the moment it becomes collaborative and they get feedback from the audience saying, I can't wait to see every presentation you do. You are so good at this. That messes people up.
And that can be life-changing.
Repeatedly. That's why I had the best job in the world.
If you were to give me an example of someone who had a breakthrough in your personal experience over many years of doing this, what would it be?
So I have many to choose from. The person I'm thinking of is probably 2016, 2017. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I've been working with an organization for 6 years. We're doing Module 2 of Connection Lab, Demand a Call to Action. We have 8 people in the workshop. One woman gets up on stage. I put her in her late 50s maybe. She's well-dressed. She looks great. She's standing on stage. She's breathing. She's confident. And it's amazing. And so she's gonna do her presentation, whatever that is. And very quietly she says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I said, let's assume I don't. I have a lot of participants in the world. Can you remind me how we know each other? And she said, you were here just about 3 years ago doing a bunch of module work with Connection Lab. And she said, I looked very different in that workshop. And I said, okay. And she said, I don't know if you remember me, but I was wearing dark gray, black clothes. I was wearing a smock. I tried to hide in the world all the time. I had gray, long hair, and I hid behind it. And I said, I do remember you. And she said, I did Module 1 of your workshop, and I wept like a child because I was facing my worst fears, and you helped me see that there were really nothing to be afraid of. And the more I practiced and the more I took a breath and just filled my lungs from the bottom up and sought the answer in relationship with my audience, because I felt so alone and scared on stage. But when I started to practice confronting what I thought was my worst fear, actually connecting with people, it wasn't so bad. People were kind of rooting for me. And I kind of had this breakthrough moment. And you asked me to tie my hair back, and so I did. I pulled it into a ponytail so people could see me. And I did my presentation, and I did it with, watery eyes and snotty nose. But you gave me tissues, and I cleaned up, and I shared with the group what I want my leadership legacy to be. And I got a round of feedback that I'd never heard in my life. And she said, I was so deeply moved by the first experience, and I took pages of notes. And I stayed in touch with my cohort, the people I did the training with. And 4 months later, my communication got so much better, I got promoted. Uh-huh. I was suddenly on a team lead. I'm leading 12 people, in our marketing department. And she said I'd never been promoted like that in my life. And she said I felt like I didn't belong there and it wasn't appropriate. But the more I did it, and I became a communications leader on the team. Then, a year and a half later, I got promoted again. And she said, as you see me today, I'm in charge of 35 people. And when I say in charge, I just model the practice of communication, and people feel seen and heard and invited. And when I saw that you were coming back for Module 2, I was the first one to sign up. And I said, you have come a beautiful long way. And she said, I really appreciate all the things you've introduced me to. And without your help, I would never be here. So I just want to say thanks.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story, Russ. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
Give us a plug again for Connection Lab.
Connection Lab is connectionlaboratory.com. That's our website. We have the podcast, Lab Notes, and we talk to participants all over the world who've been through the workshop and talk about their practice with the 6-box model and the 6 modules. So I encourage people to check out the website, I'm on LinkedIn and social media. We're developing the app, which I'm very excited about. We're developing the board game, which I'm very excited about. And I'm finally writing the book.
Nice. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Jim.
Cono Vision.
The evolution of human language, from its ancient roots to modern complexity, reflects the deep interplay between biological, cognitive, environmental, and social factors. The development of syntax and grammar allowed humans to move beyond simple communication while the diversification of languages into distinct families shows the adaptability and richness of language. As humans migrated and adapted to new environments, their languages evolved to reflect both their changing needs and the complexities of their cultures. Understanding this evolution provides valuable insights into the nature of human cognition, social organization, and cultural development. The evolution of human language is a testament to the adaptability and creativity of human beings. The invention of writing allowed language to be preserved and standardized, while the rise of global languages and the impact of digital communication have further shaped the ways in which language functions in contemporary society. As the world becomes more interconnected, language will continue to evolve, influenced by both technological advancements and cultural exchanges. The study of human engagement shows how humans think, communicate, and interact with one another, offering a window into both our past and our future.
Cono Vision.
That was episode 8 of the Cono Vision podcast. We heard a story about stories from The Spirituality of Imperfection, Storytelling and the Search for Meaning by Ernest Kurtz and Katherine Ketcham. As well, The Evolution of Human Language, From Ancient Roots to Modern Complexity by author Bruce William. And of course, Russ Hamilton and the story of Connection Lab and Russ's stories. Amazing. Thank you for listening. And as always, remember, we are all stories to be told.